Hello, friends. Tonight, we are slipping through the squeaky hinges of history to duck beneath the low, smoky rafters of a medieval inn. You might imagine medieval inns were all mud, mead, and mayhem, and you wouldn't be far wrong. Here, you'll meet Harold the innkeeper, whose temper runs as hot as his stew pot, and Greta, the serving wench who could outwit half the nobility with one eyebrow. And don't worry. Yes, there will be ale, and yes, someone is probably already arguing about whose turn it is to muck out the stables. Before we unfasten the latch on this medieval tale, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you want more historical mischief delivered straight to your device. Smash the bell, if only because it's more fun than the town criers shout at sunrise. If you're tuning in right now from a candlelit room in Prague at midnight, or snuggled up in a Tokyo apartment at 7 a.m., leave a comment to tell me where and when you're listening. I love picturing fellow history dreamers across the map, all imagining the yeasty, rowdy glow of a medieval inn. So, settle in, dim the lights, let a draft of cool air stir your imagination, and follow me through the battered oak door. Before you know it, the walls will echo with laughter, and the smell of roasting meat will find you. Let's step inside. Welcome to a day, well, and a very long night, in the life of a medieval inn. You're not awake yet. Not really. No one with any sense is, at this hour. But if you peek through the warped little window beside your lumpy straw mattress, you'll notice a ghost-pale light beginning to bleed through the fog, painting everything a bluish gray, the color of old pewter. The air is sharp, damp, and clings to your skin in a way that promises it will either clear your head or give you a cold. Welcome to the Dawn Shift Medieval Edition, where the world smells like dew, wood smoke, and the distinct funk of livestock that, even now, are already thinking about breakfast. You listen. At first, it's only the muffled snort of something large and hairy out in the stable. Could be a horse, could be your roommate. It's early yet, and you're not judging. There's the creak and groan of timber beams stretching, complaining about the morning, and somewhere below, the first tentative rattle of pots in the kitchen. Every inn has its own pre-dawn symphony, and this one is no exception. A rooster with more confidence than pitch, the hiss of cold air sneaking through badly fitted shutters, the steady drip of last night's rain from a sagging thatch roof. This is not a world of alarm clocks. Here, you wake when the day itself decides its time, usually before your body agrees. You throw on your rough woolen tunic, which, let's be honest, doesn't smell much better than the stable, and tiptoe across creaky floorboards, the chill biting at your bare toes. This place wasn't built for luxury. If you want thread count, you'll find it in the number of times the linen has been mended. But what the inn lacks in comfort, it makes up for in character, which is a polite way of saying there's a lot of shouting, singing, and the occasional lost goat. The walls are thick, made of timber, wattle, and enough mud to keep out most of the weather and some of the rodents. Not all of them, but some. Count your blessings. Downstairs, you're greeted by a scene that would make even the most hardened traveler reconsider their choices. Harold the innkeeper, hair sticking up like a frightened hedgehog, is already poking at the ashes in the hearth with a poker that has seen more arguments than actual poking. He squints at you, as if he suspects you of being either a thief or a minor demon, and grunts something that might be "good morning" or "get out of my way." Greta, who looks exactly like someone who's been awake for 2 hours too long, is balancing a tray loaded with mugs and gives you a wink that promises both coffee, well, beer, it's the Middle Ages, and a side of gossip if you play your cards right. Step outside for a moment. Yes, it's cold, but worth it. The inn sits at the edge of the village, huddled among a row of equally crooked houses and sheds, their roofs rising and falling like the uneven teeth of an old comb. Beyond them, fields shrouded in mist, the outlines of sleepy sheep, and somewhere, a distant bell tolling for early prayers. You breathe in, and the world smells gloriously real. Mud, smoke, something baking, and the unmistakable scent of wet dog. If you're feeling philosophical, you might say that this is the smell of history itself. If you're feeling hungry, you just hope someone remembered to bake bread last night. Fun fact, medieval inns weren't just places to sleep. They were the original social media platforms. Want news? Forget the town crier. You just sit by the fire, order something to drink, and wait for a merchant to come staggering in, cursing the roads and spilling stories along with his ale. If you listen carefully, you might catch rumors about wars, weddings, or the price of onions in the next county, usually wrong, but always entertaining. Harold, for the record, is a notorious gossip. He's been known to start a story at breakfast and have it halfway across the village by supper. If you don't believe me, try asking him about the phantom cow of last winter. Just be prepared to lose half an hour of your life and possibly your reputation. The inn itself is a living thing. The beams above your head are scarred by generations of smoke. The floor is swept nightly with a willow broom and never actually looks cleaner. And every table tells a story if you look closely. Knife scratches, spilled wax, and the occasional mysterious stain that no one will claim. Even the door has a personality. It sticks in summer, shrieks in winter, and always manages to slam at the worst possible moment, usually when someone is trying to sneak out after curfew. But back to you. Your stomach rumbles. Again, not much choice. Breakfast will be simple. Coarse rye bread, maybe a smear of soft cheese, possibly an egg if the hens are feeling generous. Greta slaps a mug in front of you, the foam already slipping over the side. "Best cure for morning," she says, grinning. You take a sip, warm, yeasty, with a suspicious hint of something herbal that might be yesterday's attempt at ale improvement. No one here expects miracles. If the beer doesn't kill you, the day just might. The inn is waking up around you now. Travelers stumble down the stairs, faces crumpled like laundry, boots thumping on the worn steps. A merchant from Flanders argues with a peddler about the price of salt, while a pair of local boys try to sneak past Harold to swipe a heel of bread. Outside, someone starts shouting about a lost pig, again. The world spins faster as the sun edges up, melting the mist into golden puddles on the floor. Even the rooster seems slightly less insufferable. If you want to know the truth, there's magic here. Not the wand-waving, dragon-chasing kind, but something quieter and stronger. It's in the way the morning light slides across a battered table, in the sound of laughter before noon, in the shared complaints about the draft. History isn't just kings and battles. It's breakfasts, hangovers, and lost pigs. It's the creak of a door and the warmth of a mug. For now, sit back. Let the world wake up around you. The day is only just beginning, and in a medieval inn, anything might happen. A hush and breathe. You'd think the real heart of a medieval inn would be the tap room, or maybe the rickety beds crammed upstairs, but you'd be wrong. The true, smoky, sputtering soul of the place is the hearth, the ancient stone beast squatting in the center of the common room, belching out warmth, smoke, and occasionally a chicken feather or two. If the inn were a body, this is the heart, pumping out heat, hope, and whatever last night's stew has evolved into by dawn. You hear it before you see it. The unmistakable sound of Harold, The innkeeper, grumbling champion of mornings, banging at the stubborn embers with a poker so warped it looks like a wizard's staff. The air is sharp with the tang of cold ashes and old bacon. You slide into the kitchen, careful not to trip over Greta's outstretched feet. She's sitting cross-legged by the hearth, sleeves rolled up, already shooing away the two bravest chickens who seem to believe they're invited to breakfast. "About time," Greta mutters, voice thick with the glorious combination of sleep deprivation and authority. Her cheeks are flushed, hair braided in a style that suggests either fashion or practicality, depending on how much grease is stuck in it. She tosses a hunk of wood onto the embers. Sparks leap up, catching the light in a way that makes the shadows dance across the soot-stained beams. For a moment, the room is all orange glow and moving shadows, like a story flickering to life in the dark. Every medieval inn has its own peculiar kitchen rituals. Here, the order of business is simple. First, fire. Without fire, there's no porridge, no beer warmed for the old men, no stew that's been bubbling since some forgotten feast day, no bread either, which is a crisis, given that the local baker is only slightly more reliable than a medieval weather forecast. You remember last spring's great soggy crust debacle, when Harold tried to bake the bread himself. The loaf was so hard that Greta used it to prop open the door for a week, and even the dogs turned it down. You crouch by the hearth, feeling the rough, uneven stones beneath your fingers, each one slick with centuries of spilled gravy and secrets. The kitchen smells like home, if your home is a combination of smoke, onions, animal hair, and whatever was left out overnight. Greta gestures for you to fetch the bucket from the well, because, as everyone knows, the water drawn at dawn tastes brighter, or maybe that's just her way of getting you out of her way for a minute. Stepping outside, the world is waking up, roosters bellowing, sheep making important sheep decisions, the blacksmith's hammer echoing down the lane. You haul the bucket, arms aching, and return victorious, only a little splashed, setting it down with a clatter. Greta rewards you with a scrap of bacon, which you eat so quickly it almost counts as breakfast. Back inside, the kitchen is alive. Harold has finally coaxed the fire into something resembling enthusiasm. It crackles, hisses, and devours another log. You see Greta attacking a pile of onions with a blunt knife. Her chopping rhythm is as relentless as her commentary. If the king himself showed up, he'd still wait for breakfast, and he'd eat what he's given. You try to help, only to slice your thumb, which wins you a scolding and a truly medieval bandage, a strip of linen and what may be actual spit. Now pay close attention to the inn's cast of kitchen regulars. There's old Tom, the stable hand, who insists on coming in for a whiff of the warmth, and leaves footprints wherever he goes, despite Greta's threats. There's little Annika, not more than 6 years old, who sneaks scraps for the inn's 3 cats, one-eyed, two-tailed, and no tail at all, respectively. The cats slink beneath the benches, eyeing everything like tiny, furry tax collectors. If you set your bread down for more than a moment, it is no longer your bread. At the hearth itself, Harold performs his signature move, the stirring of the morning stew. What's in it? That's a question best left unasked. Odds are good there's some carrot, a potato or two, maybe a chunk of yesterday's roast, possibly an herb scavenged from the garden by moonlight. The flavor profile is best described as robustly medieval. You're offered a spoonful, too salty, but strangely comforting, like being hugged by someone with strong opinions about garlic. Let's not forget the sounds. Every kitchen is a percussion orchestra. Wooden spoons, thumping pots, fire crackling, chickens clucking, knives thudding, feet shuffling, Harold's complaints rising and falling like Gregorian chants gone off key. Occasionally, someone bursts in with urgent news, the kind that can absolutely wait until after breakfast. The local miller, for example, once delivered a breathless warning about a fox in the henhouse, only to get stuck on his own muddy boots and tracked half the farm across Greta's freshly swept floor. That was not a good morning for anyone. By now, the scents in the air have evolved. There's yeast from the rising bread, earthy roots simmering, the greasy promise of bacon, and always a faint undertone of ale. You glance at the shelf above the hearth, crowded with pots, ladles, and what looks suspiciously like a dried rat, which Greta claims is good luck. You don't ask. The pace quickens. Feet pound overhead, guests grumbling as they're pulled from their beds by the aroma of food, or possibly the shouting. A merchant from Bruges demands hot water for his wash basin. A squire yells about missing boots, and someone in the corner begins a sneezing fit that rattles the pewter mugs. The inn is officially awake. Greta barks orders. Harold glares at a loaf of bread as if it personally offended him. You, dear traveler, try not to get trampled by a boy with a jug, or a girl wielding a broom like a weapon. Somewhere in the chaos, you find a moment of peace. You lean against the stone, feeling the heat seep through your tunic, warming your bones. The sun has crept higher, painting the room gold and shadow. For just a second, the kitchen is still, a pocket of old magic, all ancient stones and comfort, firelight and faces made soft by morning. And then, as if on cue, someone shouts, "The geese are loose again." Harold groans. Greta rolls her eyes. The day begins for real. A hush and breathe. Don't be fooled by Harold's wild hair, permanent scowl, or the fact that he's currently negotiating with a wheel of cheese as though it's a sworn enemy. This innkeeper is not just the king of keys and cellars, but the undisputed grandmaster of survival by wit. If you think the tools of his trade are limited to tankards, turnspits, and the occasional broom, you're in for a rude and highly entertaining awakening. You watch as Harold, with all the subtlety of a bear in a berry patch, rummages through the ancient sideboard behind the bar. Out come the true treasures, a bundle of iron keys jangling like the world's least musical wind chime, a slotted wooden spoon, his staff of office, he'll joke, if he's in a good mood, a thick book of debts and credits, and, most mysterious of all, a small bundle wrapped in greasy cloth. "You don't want to know," he mutters, noticing your interest. Of course you do want to know, but you also want to keep your breakfast down. But let's talk about these secret weapons. Every innkeeper, from the grandest city host to the humblest crossroads warden, needs a personal arsenal if they're to keep the chaos contained and the profits flowing. Harold's most formidable weapon, his memory. You see it in action as Greta tries to palm off an extra mug of ale on the sly. Harold's eyes narrow, and without looking up he says, "That's 4 mugs for table 3, Greta, unless brother Marius suddenly developed 2 more hands." Caught red-handed, Greta only grins. It's a game, this battle of wits, and she enjoys it almost as much as Harold. You soon realize that everything here runs on a blend of ritual, improvisation, and bluff. Take, for example, the Book of Reckonings, a battered ledger with ink stains, dried soup, and what might be an ancient blood stain from a roast chicken, you hope. Harold can recite debts from memory. Who owes a farthing? Who paid in salt? Who's already skipped town? Sir Edwin? Paid with promises and a cracked lute string. Never trust a man whose boots are shinier than his coin, he confides. Sometimes he'll let a regular slide for weeks. Sometimes he'll chase a merchant down the lane for a penny. It's all about reading people and knowing which ones might return with an army if you press too hard. Then there's the spoon. Not just any spoon, but the spoon. Ancient, cracked, seasoned with so many stews and soups it's practically an artifact. Harold waves it like a marshal's baton, conducting the inn's orchestra. Table 6, more bread. Annika, stop feeding the dog under the bench. Greta, for heaven's sake, the kitchen's on fire again. The spoon's also handy for knocking sense into stubborn guests, figuratively usually, or pointing out which pie is safe to eat and which is likely to start crawling off the table under its own power. Of course, not every weapon is wielded in plain sight. Watch closely and you'll see the sleight of hand. Harold palms an extra coin under the bar, quietly slips the best cut of cheese to the tanner's wife because she brings him news from the market, and, with a glance, signals to Greta when the local reeve is snooping around for unpaid taxes. It's a dance, all nods, winks, and the occasional not-so-accidental spill. Now, perhaps the innkeeper's greatest and least glamorous secret weapon, the nose. Harold can sniff out trouble before it even crosses the threshold. Stranger in the lane, he murmurs, before the door even opens. Smells like new boots and old lies. Sure enough, a traveler appears moments later, muddy to the knees and already haggling over the price of a bed. It's uncanny. Some claim he's part bloodhound. Others suspect he simply has the world's best spy network, a coalition of gossipy regulars and sharp-eyed children, all paid in scraps and secrets. And just in case you're still thinking this is a cushy gig, let's do a quick inventory of the dangers. Rowdy mercenaries who can drink an entire cask and still have the energy to break every stool in the tap room. Wandering minstrels who forget to pay, but never forget to sing off-key. Occasional food inspectors, yes, even in the Middle Ages, whose arrival sparks a frenzy of frantic scrubbing and discreet shooing of chickens from the larder. Harold's most nerve-wracking weapon, the inn smile. That rictus grin he flashes at the most troublesome guests, the kind that says, "I'll tolerate your antics tonight, but tomorrow you'd better run." You try to copy it in the polished pewter plate and nearly scare yourself. Best leave the diplomacy to the experts. There are naturally unwritten rules for all this weaponry. Never show your best cheese to the first customer of the day. Always keep the sharpest knife for yourself. Never in the hands of a drunken knight. Know who to trust with your good wine, and who to serve the special batch, which is code for watered down to a heroic degree. And, most importantly, never, ever turn your back on the Book of Reckonings when Greta is nearby. She's added a debt or two herself over the years, sometimes in actual coin, sometimes in little pictures of chickens, which Harold pretends not to see. And what of the mysterious bundle, you ask? You'll never get a straight answer. Greta claims it's Harold's potion kit, herbs, spices, a sprig of something so pungent it clears your sinuses from across the room. Others whisper it's a relic from his time as a soldier, a lucky charm or a packet of ancient forbidden peppercorns, highly prized and likely smuggled. Harold just grunts, stashes it in a drawer, and tells you to mind your own business. You resolve to do just that, while also keeping an eye on the drawer. Curiosity is a dangerous thing, but so is boredom. All these weapons, the memory, the spoon, the ledger, the nose, the secret bundle, aren't just props. They're a survival kit, and every move is honed by years of keeping peace between brawling knights, gossipy widows, greedy merchants, and the regular tide of hungry, cranky travelers. Harold is equal parts general, diplomat, magician, and, yes, maybe a little bit of con artist. But then, if you could run a medieval inn without at least a touch of trickery, you'd probably be out of business by sunset. And now, as the door bangs open and the morning crowd surges in, muddy boots, laughter, curses, and all, Harold flourishes his spoon like a scepter and takes command once more. For a moment you see him wink, just slightly, and you realize every day is a battle. But the innkeeper always has another weapon up his sleeve. A hush and breathe. You haven't truly visited a medieval inn until you've had an awkward run-in with a chamber pot. Forget any notion of romantic candlelight or tapestries fluttering in the breeze. If you step wrong before breakfast, you're liable to catch a toe, or worse, in a wooden bucket best left unexamined. In this world, private facilities means hoping no one's lurking in the hallway as you make your midnight dash, praying the contents stay inside the rim. If there's a grand secret to surviving here, it's this: step lightly, breathe through your mouth, and never, ever trust a pot with a wobble. You awaken, if you can call it that, to the sounds of the inn coming alive. Boards creaking overhead, whispered arguments about who's going to empty last night's hall, and, somewhere down the hall, a sharp yelp that means someone's luck just ran out. Chamber pot duty, as Greta will gleefully explain, is the lowest rung of the inn's social ladder, reserved for the youngest, newest, or least lucky member of staff. Today, Annika has drawn the short straw, and you catch sight of her grimly hauling 2 brimming buckets toward the back door, arms locked straight, nose wrinkled in heroic disgust. "Oh, don't look so horrified," Greta calls, breezing past with a tray of bread. "Everyone's done their turn, even Harold, though he claims he once paid a tinker's boy a whole penny to take his shift. Worst investment he ever made. The boy threw the lot in the duck pond, and the ducks haven't been right since." There is, to be fair, a certain routine to this indignity. You dodge and weave down the corridor, careful to avoid a fresh puddle, don't ask, and find yourself face to face with the local merchant, eyes bleary, balancing his own pot with the resigned air of a man who knows dignity is a privilege reserved for the nobility. "Fine weather for it," he mumbles, which you decide is either sarcasm or the start of a new medieval proverb. But here's where the magic happens. For every indignity, there's a secret. Chamber pots are the keys to the castle, socially speaking. You want to know who drank too much last night? Whose nerves got the better of them before a big deal? Who's sneaking extra cheese under their pillow, or, worse, who's sleeping in someone else's bed? You just listen to the traffic. Annika returns, cheeks flushed with scandal, and breathlessly reports to Greta. The night in room 3 was up 3 times, and the peddler, well, he's not alone anymore. The information flows faster than ale at a feast, and every bucket tells a story. Some of them you'd rather not hear before breakfast. Even Harold, who likes to pretend he's above it all, can't help but keep an ear to the corridor. If he wants to know which guests are about to skip out on their bill, or which couple has decided to turn their argument into a dramatic midnight duet, he just listens. Walls here are thin, and secrets have legs. Sometimes it's a whispered threat, sometimes a giggle in the dark, sometimes the unmistakable sound of boots creeping past the window, usually heading for the privy, sometimes for a more illicit rendezvous behind the stables. This is how, over stale bread and lukewarm beer, the true gossip network is built. Greta, never one to waste an opportunity, orchestrates the inn's grapevine with the skill of a conductor. She leans against the kitchen door, arms folded, eyebrow raised, and lets the stories come to her. The merchant's wife who keeps asking for extra hot water, though everyone knows the only bath big enough for 2 is the horse trough. The traveling friar, supposedly on a mission of mercy, who was seen slipping out after dark with the suspiciously full pouch and a very empty wine jug. The tanner's apprentice, who, according to Annika, spends more time loitering outside Greta's window than actually working. Everyone here is a detective, a chronicler, a co-conspirator. You think you're being subtle, but every cough, every door creak, every suspicious silence is cataloged, debated, and, by supper, turned into a saga. Sometimes you hear your own name muttered in the smoky gloom, paired with rumors you could swear you haven't earned yet. Did you see the stranger from last night? Came in with muddy boots and left before dawn. Probably a spy or a bard running from his last audience. You try to look mysterious, but only succeed in dropping your spoon, which draws even more attention. Gossip, in this place, is currency, more valuable than silver, sharper than any knife. It buys you favors, smooths over insults, and, if you're smart, wins you the choicest portion of Greta's pie. Just be warned, the price is steep if you're caught passing along a falsehood. The last fellow who started a rumor about Harold's hair being a wig ended up with a mop and a week's worth of chamber pot duty. He never spoke above a whisper after that. Of course, some secrets are too heavy for even the bravest gossips to carry. Everyone knows not to mention the old scar on Harold's wrist, or why Greta never wears shoes on market day, or the real reason the chimney sweeper always arrives with a flower behind his ear. Some things are better left in the shadows, like that one chamber pot that's been tucked behind the woodpile since last Michaelmas. No one's brave enough to open it, and so it's become the subject of its own legend, a story retold to scare new guests or amuse children on rainy afternoons.
And then there's you, dear traveler. Already the rumor mill is churning. Where you come from, what secrets remain with you, better ones. If you're clever, you'll trade your story for a mug of the good ale or a fresh slice of cheese. If you're not, well, prepare to become the hero. Fill in the comic relief of tonight's tales. Just remember, the road to good. And for the love of all that's good, put the lid back on the boat.
Finally, the sun climbs high enough to bleach the last shadows from the corridor. The buckets are emptied, with varying degrees of enthusiasm and accuracy, and the inn begins to smell faintly less like a barn and more like breakfast. Chamber pot duty is done, for now. The whispers fade into the clatter and chatter of a day beginning in earnest. Greta leans in, voice low, eyes sparkling with secrets. Welcome to the inn, where nothing stays hidden and even the pots have ears. A hush and breathe. If you thought breakfast at a medieval inn would be a subdued affair, quiet plates, gentle conversation, maybe a dainty pastry or two, then, well, you're about to be cheerfully disillusioned. Here, as the day officially collides with hunger, breakfast is less a meal and more a small daily battle. The rules are simple. Find food, defend food, eat food, repeat as necessary. And if you can steal a bite from your neighbor without being stabbed with a spoon, all the better. The smell hits you first. It's robust and inescapable. Wood smoke, warm yeast, frying fat, and, over everything, a sharp, ever-present hint of onion that no one really remembers adding. You squeeze onto a bench at a trestle table, already groaning under the weight of elbows, tankards, and dubious claims about who saw the biggest rat last night. The table itself is ancient, scored by 1,000 knives and notched with tally marks, some for debts, some for conquests, and some, Greta claims, for the number of times a guest has fallen asleep face first in their gruel. Now, here comes the inn's continental breakfast, medieval style, thick slices of yesterday's rye, dense enough to survive a siege, hunks of sharp cheese, so flavorful you can almost taste the goat's opinion about being milked at dawn, and eggs when the hens are feeling generous, which, judging by Greta's grumbling, they are not this morning. If you're lucky and someone's had a good night at dice, you might see a slab of cold bacon or a crusty end of pie smuggled from last night's feast before the dogs found it. The first round of mugs thuds down. Beer for everyone, because water is only for washing, and tea is something the nobles drink while pretending not to notice the lice. The beer is tepid and faintly sour, but it's yours, and no one's going to pry it from your hand without a fight. Greta makes her rounds with a tray balanced on her hip, dodging flailing elbows and the occasional flying crust. "Breakfast for the bold, indigestion for the brave," she announces, plunking down plates with a flourish that would make a circus juggler jealous. You dig in, tearing bread with your hands and learning quickly why people in the Middle Ages were so attached to their teeth while they lasted. Across the table, a merchant from York is trying to butter his bread with a knife so blunt it might as well be a stick. Next to him, a sleepy-eyed squire attempts to charm Greta with tales of tournament glory, only to get a ladle of porridge dumped in front of him and a warning to save the sweet talk for the horses. The conversation ebbs and flows, punctuated by laughter, arguments about the best way to milk a cow, and the occasional scandalous whisper about who was seen sneaking out of whose room at dawn. It's a living, breathing tapestry of humanity, noisy, chaotic, and utterly wonderful. You catch snippets. So I said to the tanner, "If your boots leak again, don't blame my dog." "Heard the miller's wife has a new kitten, but it's got 2 tails. Swear on my mother's grave." "If the bread's stale, just dunk it in the ale, it'll go down easier." On rare mornings, Harold himself deigns to join the table, holding court at the head with a mug in one hand and a glower in the other. He inspects the bread like a jeweler appraising a fake gem, then nods, satisfied, and sets about interrogating each guest in turn. "Traveling far today? Got coin for your supper? Any trouble following you?" He says it with a twinkle, but you sense the warning beneath. Pay your bill, keep your drama to a minimum, and remember that the walls in this place have ears, and possibly tongues. Breakfast is a test of alliances, too. You'll see old friends splitting a heel of bread, new rivals eyeing each other across the butter dish, and a pair of lovers sharing a mug in a way that would get them thrown out of most respectable chapels. The regulars have their own rituals. Old Tom insists on dipping his bread in beer, Annika nibbles cheese and tells fortunes with leftover crumbs, and Greta, ever the social engineer, keeps an eye on who sits where and with whom. The power dynamics shift as quickly as the weather, and if you're smart, you'll pick your seat with care. Too close to the fire, and you'll get pressed into helping with dishes. Too far, and you'll miss all the good gossip. Of course, breakfast is also when the truly broke come out of hiding. They slip in quietly, heads down, and try to blend in among the crowd. Greta, who knows every face within 3 villages, has a soft spot for these souls. She'll slip an extra hunk of cheese or a heel of bread onto their plate with a wink and a muttered, "Eat quick and don't tell Harold." Harold pretends not to see, though if you watch closely you might notice him gruffly refilling an empty mug or tossing a coin to the beggar boy by the door. No one here is rich, but generosity has a way of sneaking in, disguised as practicality. You glance around the room, feeling the rhythm of morning settle into your bones. A dog barks under the table, chasing scraps. A rat makes a dash for a crumb, only to be intercepted by one of the inn's 3 resident cats, who is frankly much more interested in your breakfast than in rodent control. The room hums with the energy of a new day, the promise of fresh trouble, and the distant hope that maybe, just maybe, the bread will be a little softer tomorrow. If you're lucky, you'll end your meal with a surprise, a berry tart, a sliver of honeycomb, or, once in a blue moon, a piece of actual fruit. These are rare treats, doled out with ceremony, and usually reserved for honored guests or the fastest hands at the table. If you manage to snag one, guard it with your life. The inn is full of opportunists, and nothing is sacred when it comes to sugar. Finally, as the plates are cleared and the last of the beer is slurped, breakfast winds down. The bold head out to the fields, the broke linger over crumbs, and Greta circles the room like a shepherd counting sheep. You push back your bench, wipe your hands on your tunic, and prepare to face the day. Slightly fuller, possibly poorer, but definitely richer in stories. A hush and breathe. If you imagine that the guests at a medieval inn would be a predictable bunch, simple folk, farmers, maybe a merchant or two, well, congratulations, you've invented the world's dullest tavern. Here, under this patchwork roof and behind these walls thick with secrets and the occasional mouse, every stranger who shuffles in is a mystery wrapped in homespun, sometimes with a hidden dagger tucked beneath the mystery for good measure. You spot it the moment you step back into the common room, breadcrumbs still clinging to your sleeve. Eyes, all sorts. Some are hooded and shifty, others as bright as polished copper. A few avoid your gaze, busy staring into their mugs as if the secrets of the universe might be found in the dregs. But everyone is watching everyone else, even the cat, perched like a fat, furry judge on the windowsill, is tracking who enters, who leaves, and who tries to sneak a sausage when Greta's back is turned. Over at the fire, a merchant from Bruges is counting coins loudly, as if daring someone to try their luck. Next to him, a sullen-looking knight with a scar slicing through his eyebrow picks at his food with the careful concentration of a man who's seen more duels than dinners. You can practically feel the tension rolling off him, a prickly, don't ask, don't touch force field that even the dog respects. In the far corner, beneath the shadow of a tapestry that's seen better centuries, a woman in a sky-blue cloak hums softly while sewing a mysterious emblem onto her sleeve. She glances up, catches your eye, and just for a second, you're certain she knows exactly where you hid your last coin. And if you're thinking, surely no one is spying on me, think again. In this inn, everyone has an agenda, even the lad mopping the floor, who, as it turns out, sells stories to the reeve for a penny apiece. Take a deep breath. The air is heavy with expectation, and something else you can't quite place. Maybe it's the scent of old wine. Maybe it's the knowledge that, just beyond the inn's battered door, the world is swirling with news and trouble. Harold is leaning against the bar, arms folded, watching the door with the patience of a cat at a mouse hole. "You never know who you'll get," he mutters. "Last month it was a runaway monk. Month before, a troubadour who could juggle knives. We still haven't found all the knives." You soon realize there are three kinds of guests at the inn: the regulars, the passers-through, and the ones who wish to be neither but are forced into public by fate or bad weather. The regulars are easy to spot. They sit in the same seats every night, argue about the same four topics: crops, taxes, which saint smells the worst, and whether beer tastes better on a Friday, and treat any new face with suspicion or, if Greta is feeling generous, with a loud and embarrassing welcome. Old Tom, the stable hand, is regaling a nearby bench with tales of a wolf that was this big, arms outstretched, and his personal theory that the miller's donkey is actually a cursed prince. The listeners nod solemnly, either swept up in the story or just happy to be off their feet. Then you've got the passers-through. These are the ones with mud on their boots, wary eyes, and a way of holding themselves that says, "Yes, I might leave tonight, and if I do, I'm not paying for the stew." They scan the room with the keen edge of practiced travelers. Some are merchants on their way to market, purses clutched like sacred relics. Others are soldiers traveling in twos or threes, boots caked with half the kingdom's dirt. There's always a rumor of highwaymen on the roads, and for every real thief there are three guests who only wish they had the courage. You hear snatches of their stories in the spaces between bites. Tales of washed-out roads, bandits bold as falcons, the price of salt in distant towns, and how the king's men are recruiting for another war. Aren't they always? Sometimes, if you listen very carefully, you'll catch the whisper of something darker. a name said in hush, a plan sketched with a fingertip in spilled ale. You don't ask questions unless you want to be part of the answer. Finally, there are the unplaceables. The woman in blue, the silent boy with the ink-stained fingers, the gray-bearded man who never seems to eat but always has a full mug. They drift in and out, their motives as clear as the inn's window panes after a week of rain. Sometimes they're running from something, sometimes toward it, and sometimes they just want to listen to the world spinning by. The only thing more dangerous than asking them their business is not asking at all. Greta, of course, knows everyone, or claims she does. She glides from table to table, swapping jests with the familiar faces and slyly interrogating the newcomers. She always asks, "What brings you to our inn?" and listens, one eyebrow cocked, for the half-truth in the reply. Her favorite game is matching strangers with their secrets before they've had their second mug. The truth is, the guest list is always changing. Pilgrims bound for holy sites, jugglers trailing hungry dogs, blacksmiths seeking work, or even a lost scholar hoping for news of a vanished friend. Once, legend has it, a disguised nobleman spent a whole week in the loft, writing love letters and drinking Harold's best wine, on credit, naturally. Another time, a fugitive priest hid out in the cellar for 3 days, trading blessings for bread and stories. Harold still checks the wine barrels just in case. As the room warms with bodies and boasts, you begin to see the beauty in the chaos. There's no such thing as a dull guest, only those clever enough to hide their stories. The inn is a crossroads, a magnet for everything wild and wandering. And if you watch and listen, you'll find that every face is a door to another world, one that might open if you're brave enough to knock. You finish your beer, the taste of secrets on your tongue, and glance around. Who will you meet next? The merchant with the crooked smile? The knight with a haunted past? Or perhaps the next tale will be your own, woven into the rumor mill before you even step out the door. A hush and breathe. Let's step outside, shall we? Through the battered back door, into the chill that nips your nose and the cacophony that is every medieval inn's unofficial soundtrack. The shuffling, snorting, and downright opinionated animals who make the stables their kingdom. You can't truly know an inn until you've braved its yard at dawn, where the straw is never quite dry. The air is always flavored with the aroma of last night's horses, and the world's best gossip is whispered by children with mud on their knees. Your boots sink into the soft ground somewhere between earth and compost, and you're instantly grateful for the thick soles. Though if you're wearing anything fancier than hobnails, you're either a fool or a very lost nobleman. Around you, the day's first commotion is well underway. The stables themselves are lopsided, patched with boards that don't match, and roofed with thatch that's more hole than hat. Inside, the livestock are conducting their own morning assembly, horses stamping, mules braying, geese squabbling, and a rooster issuing threats like a petty warlord. First, you're nearly bowled over by Annika, racing after a piglet with more determination than sense. "Got you," she squeals, followed immediately by, "No, wait, come back!" The piglet naturally escapes. Somewhere in the straw, a mouse starts a tiny riot, and one of the inn's cats gives chase, only to be distracted by the alluring promise of spilled cream. If you listen, really listen, you'll hear the deeper hum of stable life, the grooms humming tunelessly as they shovel manure, the squeak of a wheelbarrow, the steady rhythm of water sloshing into troughs. Greta's cousin Eric is here this morning, up to his elbows in hay and high spirits, spinning stories of last night's guests for whoever's close enough to catch them. "Did you see the merchant's boots?" He laughs, tossing a forkful of straw. "Polished so bright they scared the rats. the regulars gather here not just for work, but for whispers. Because in the stable, away from the ears of innkeepers and the sharp eyes of Greta, secrets slip out like loose horses. Now let's address the most notorious element of any inn stable, the sticky fingers. Oh yes, where there are valuables unattended and attention divided, the pickpockets and pranksters emerge from the shadows like mushrooms after rain. Sticky fingers come in all shapes: thieving boys, enterprising girls, the odd grown-up who never quite outgrew the urge to borrow a little extra. You spot one now, a boy with quick eyes and quicker hands, sidling up to the merchant's saddlebags with a look of studied innocence. He whistles a tune, glances over his shoulder, and slips a hand inside. Out comes a heel of bread, a bit of cheese, and, bold move, a shiny new buckle. Before anyone can call out, he vanishes into the hay, leaving behind only the faint echo of his giggle. Not all the larceny is so light-hearted. There are real dangers too. Traveling bands with an eye for unguarded horses, desperate men who'd sell anything not nailed down, and a few things that are, and even the occasional highwayman disguised as a sleepy drover. That's why Harold does his best to keep the stable doors locked tight at night, and why he's rumored to have a spiked cudgel hidden behind the tack rack. Best deterrent is suspicion, he claims, though the regulars say it's really Greta's glare that does the trick. And let's not forget the horses. Each one is a personality, some noble, some so stubborn they could be mules in disguise, and a few who seem to know more about the inn's secrets than the innkeeper himself. Old Moss, the draft horse, has pulled so many carts and heard so many confessions that the locals say he nods knowingly whenever someone lies within earshot. There's even talk of the ghost horse, a pale, silent creature said to appear on foggy mornings, vanishing the moment you try to touch it. Greta rolls her eyes at these stories but always leaves an extra carrot on the fence, just in case. You wander past the stalls, feeling the tickle of hay at your ankles and the solid comfort of wood under your palm. The horses snuffle, the cows shuffle, and somewhere in the rafters, doves coo like a tired lullaby. There's work to be done, mucking out stalls, checking hooves, and, for the truly unlucky, hunting down whatever just made that alarming crash behind the feed barrels. The chores are endless, but no one really complains. In the stable, life is honest, sweaty, smelly, occasionally dangerous, but never dull. Meanwhile, the little dramas unfold. A farrier argues with a merchant about the price of shoeing, each claiming the other is trying to rob him blind. A wandering friar preaches to the chickens, who, to be fair, make a more attentive audience than the guests in the tap room. The blacksmith's apprentice tries to impress Annika by vaulting over a fence, only to land in a puddle and come up grinning, mud from ear to ear. By now your hands are dirty, your boots are suspiciously heavier, and you've picked up at least 2 rumors you probably shouldn't repeat. You pause by the fence, looking out over the fields beyond, where the mist is lifting and the sun is finally making a proper effort. In the distance, a cart rattles toward the inn, and you wonder what sort of characters it will disgorge this time. Pilgrims, bandits, or just another round of muddy travelers with stories to swap and debts to incur. The stables are where the day's rhythm truly takes root. It's the first breath of the inn, the place where fortunes can turn with a found coin or a lost chicken, where a morning spent in honest work is worth more than any bed of feathers. And if your purse is a little lighter when you return to the inn, well, consider it a small price to pay for the privilege of witnessing the backdoor world in all its ragged, roaring glory. You wipe your hands, brush the straw from your hair, and make your way back inside, the door creaking shut behind you. The sounds of the stable linger, a lowing cow, a distant shout, the echo of laughter and theft. a hush and breathe. There's a certain vibration in the air, a nervous, tingling energy that tells you today is no ordinary day. You know it before you even see the swelling crowds or smell the boiling cabbage. It's market day, and that means the inn and the whole village have slipped into a giddy, slightly frantic state, somewhere between festival and free-for-all. If you were hoping for a moment of quiet, abandon hope now. On market day, the world comes crashing to your door, carrying sacks, gossip, questionable wares, and enough noise to frighten a monastery full of monks. The main street is barely visible beneath the press of bodies. Your boots slide from straw to mud to a patch of something unidentifiable. Don't dwell. And every step brings a new assault on your senses. Children shriek and dart through legs. Old women brandish geese like cudgels, and a fishmonger yells at nobody in particular while waving a herring the size of your arm. The air is thick with competing aromas, roasting chestnuts, spiced wine, sweat, mud, and the unmistakable vinegar tang of pickled onions. You inhale it all and try not to look too closely at the mystery stewing in the pot near the baker's stall. Of course, the inn is right at the crossroads of this storm, a living stage for every performance, brawl, bargain, and blunder that the market brings. Greta has already doubled the number of mugs in circulation, and Harold's hired an extra boy just to ferry empty jugs from the tables to the tap room and back. The regulars stake out their favorite seats early, transforming the common room into something like a private box at a particularly rowdy theater. Outside, strangers peer in with longing, some elbowing for a table, others simply soaking in the spectacle of inn life at its most unhinged. The guest list triples on market day. A rag-and-bone man arrives, trailing a cart bristling with old tools and new rumors. A jeweler's apprentice hawks shiny trinkets that might, if you're lucky, contain a grain of actual silver. A clutch of nuns from the next village huddle together, eyeing the tap room with suspicion and faint curiosity, while a bearded minstrel strums the same song he's been playing since dawn, only pausing to cough theatrically and pass his cap for coins. It's a day for deals, and everyone knows it. You see Harold working the room, all charm and calculation, sniffing out which merchants are flush with coin and which are angling to swap a sack of turnips for their bill. Greta, meanwhile, is in her element, balancing a tray, 3 conversations, and a scheme to barter for a new kettle all at once. Her laugh rings out, slicing through the noise, and she winks as she serves. Careful, love. The last man who asked for seconds left with half a goat and a marriage proposal. The inn is also the emergency ward for wounded pride and bruised egos. You spot a farmer nursing a scraped knee after losing a wrestling match with a sheep. The sheep, incidentally, is now napping contentedly beneath the bench. A pie seller sobs over a ruined batch, comforted by 2 sympathetic drinkers who, by remarkable coincidence, have already eaten half her wares. Money changes hands so fast it's a wonder anyone knows what's theirs. Coin purses jingle, hands dart, grasp, release, and clutch again. You pass a table where 3 burly men argue over a single dice game. 2 claim victory, the third just wants his boots back. You see the boy with sticky fingers again, now upgraded to a slightly larger, stickier purse. He flashes you a grin and vanishes into the crowd, his mischief blending into the blur of market commerce. Every now and then, the noise surges. A shout, a crash, the clang of a blacksmith's hammer. The Reeves men try to keep order, but nobody takes them seriously until they actually start writing names in the ledger. A dog runs through the legs of a startled priest who drops his apples. The dog is last seen with 3 nuns in hot pursuit. It's the kind of chaos that is, paradoxically, as predictable as sunrise and as wild as a thunderstorm. Inside the inn, there's a temporary truce between regulars and newcomers. Strangers are bought drinks, rivalries put on hold, and even Harold relaxes, just a little. Old Tom passes a jug to the merchant from Bruges, who toasts to good bargains and better stories. The merchant's apprentice, not to be outdone, buys a round for the kitchen staff, instantly earning a week's worth of gossip and a free heel of bread. But don't let the laughter fool you. On market day, fortunes are made and lost in an instant. A careless hand, a misheard price, or an unlucky roll of the dice, and someone leaves lighter than they arrived. Harold always says, "Market day is a river. Swim too slow and you'll drown. Swim too fast and you'll lose your breeches." You decide to hang on to your coin purse and your dignity, at least until the afternoon. Still, there's something infectious about it. The feeling that anything could happen, that any stranger could become a friend or a rival or a debtor, and that every story is just waiting to be traded for a mug of ale and a good seat by the fire. By noon, the inn is bursting with life. The tables are sticky with spilt beer and laughter, and even the oldest regulars admit in between grumbles that market day brings a certain magic you can't find anywhere else. When the sun starts to dip, the crowds thin, the sellers pack up, and the world exhales. Greta counts her tips and flirts with the idea of buying a peacock feather. For luck, or maybe just for mischief. Harold tallies the day's profits, muttering about short change and long tails. You, feet sore and head spinning, find a quiet corner and watch the last scraps of market day drift away, like breadcrumbs, like old songs, like the memory of 1,000 market days before this one. A hush and breathe. Ah, love in a medieval inn. The air is ripe with possibility and a bit of something else. Here, romance is less a matter of candlelight and poetry, and more an awkward dance performed while scratching at the collar of your tunic and pretending not to notice the suspicious movement in your hair. Let's be honest, if you're looking for a tale of chivalric courtship, go find a bard. If you want real love with all its bumps, bruises, and bug bites, you're in the right place. You first spot the local bard, the one with the mournful eyes and a lute that's missing 3 strings, sidling up to the fireplace, tuning his instrument with all the precision of a man who's never actually played a song the same way twice. He's eyeing Greta, who's slicing cheese with the deadly efficiency of a woman who's seen one too many marriage proposals on a Tuesday morning. "For you, fair lady, a ballad," he croons. She doesn't even look up. "Make it short and don't wake the chickens." The regulars are snickering, elbows jabbing ribs, as the bard launches into a wobbly song about courtly love, lost fortunes, and a maiden fair, who, by the 3rd verse, has already run off with the stable boy and a jar of pickles. No one listens too closely. They're all busy dealing with the inn's less poetic reality, the itch that never quite leaves, no matter how hard you scrub or how fresh the rushes on the floor. Greta claims her secret is dousing her hair with vinegar and pretending to be unbothered. Old Tom, however, swears by bathing in ale, which, incidentally, explains why he always smells faintly like yesterday's hangover. Love, in a place like this, has to be sneaky. You'll spot it if you look. The sidelong glances traded over mugs of beer, the hurried conference behind the woodpile, the loaf of bread broken and shared between 2 hands that linger just a little too long. It's often a partnership of practicality as much as passion. 2 incomes are better than 1, especially if you're both good at pinching coppers and feigning innocence when Harold comes looking for missing spoons. Still, hope springs eternal. There's always someone plotting to woo the barmaid, impress the merchant's daughter, or sneak a kiss in the stable after dark. Harold pretends not to notice, but he keeps a close tally on who's lingering after curfew, and Greta has perfected the art of the disapproving glare, a weapon more powerful than any rolling pin. You once witnessed a cocky peddler, all swagger and promises, try his luck with Greta. She listened, nodded, and handed him a chamber pot to empty. He took the hint. But even in the itchiest, draftiest corners, you'll find genuine sweetness. 2 hands entwined beneath the table, a shy smile across the smoky tap room, a song whispered in the dark while the rest of the world snores, and occasionally, someone snores so loud the rats pack up and leave for the night. Annika, forever matchmaking, swears she can spot a budding romance by the way a couple shares their cheese, or more accurately, how fiercely they guard it from each other. The truth is, everyone here knows heartbreak just as well as love. The widow at the window, forever waiting for a letter that never comes. The merchant whose wife left him for a traveling glassblower, taking the good cutlery and his favorite socks. Even Harold, crusty as old bread, sometimes stares into the fire a little longer than necessary, remembering someone who used to laugh at his worst jokes. Lice, meanwhile, are the great equalizer. Nobles, peasants, poets, and pickpockets, they all scratch, they all suffer, and they all swear their method is the only one that works. On cold nights, when everyone bundles together by the hearth, you can hear the quiet chorus of scratching and sighing, and the murmured hope that maybe tomorrow the inn will finally spring for new rushes. It won't. Greta, ever the pragmatist, uses love as a bargaining chip. "Fetch more firewood," she tells a moon-eyed farm boy, "and maybe I'll let you walk me to the well." She flirts like she fights, with strategy, humor, and a solid right hook if you get too cheeky. Sometimes she relents, letting herself blush beneath the candlelight, but just as often she shrugs, sweeps past, and leaves another suitor dumbstruck in her wake. Of course, there's always someone who takes things a little too far. The squire with delusions of poetry who recites sonnets to the cows. The merchant who tries to buy affection with a single wilting daisy and a questionable compliment about sturdy hands. The widow who's convinced that the fortune teller's prediction of a tall, dark stranger applies to every passing mule driver. The inn, naturally, keeps a running tally of failed courtships, chalk marks behind the bar or a special seat reserved for the lovelorn. It's easy to laugh, but it's all part of the fabric of life here. Love might not be grand or glamorous, but it's persistent. A weed pushing up between cobblestones, a flower blooming in a crack in the wall. And even if the lice are biting and the prospects are grim, there's always hope that tomorrow will bring a new face, a fresh start, or at the very least, a partner willing to split the chores. As the night creeps in and the rushes rustle with secrets, you watch a young couple slip out into the darkness, hands linked, heads close together. The bard strums a final, slightly off-key note, and Greta finally cracks a smile. The regulars sigh, stretch, and surrender to the simple comforts of companionship, however imperfect, however itchy. A hush and breathe. Noon at the inn is the true test of survival, stamina, and seat selection. By now, the breakfast crowd has either shuffled off to toil in the fields, taken up residence near the hearth with another mug, or, if particularly wise, found a quiet nook to nap off their morning ale. But just as the sun climbs to its peak, a new and even hungrier crowd storms the battered oak door, drawn in by the twin promises of food and a place to air their latest complaints. You grab a spot at one of the long trestle tables just in time. There's always a scuffle over who gets the bench with the least splinters. Elbows jab for position. A few regulars slide their tankards across the table with a sly wink, staking territory like knights laying claim to disputed land. The surface of the table is a map of the day's misadventures, gravy stains, smeared ink, a forgotten dice, and the ever-present sticky ring left by someone's mug of mead. The midday meal is an orchestra of chaos. The kitchen door bangs open and closed in a rhythm that's half music, half battle march. Greta sweeps through, deft as a cat, balancing a tray piled with steaming bowls. Today's menu? Stew. Yesterday's menu? Also stew, though perhaps with a different meat, or at least a different story about the meat. The stew here is an ongoing saga. Its contents a mystery, its seasoning bold, and its heat capable of scalding tongues and melting even the crustiest of cynics. You spoon some into your mouth, brace for impact, and are pleasantly surprised when you find a piece of carrot that's almost tender. There's bread too, chewy, crusty, and more effective at mending friendships than any apology. Slices are traded for favors, swapped for secrets, or simply snatched by the fastest hands. A wedge of cheese makes its rounds, suspiciously smaller with each pass. Someone claims there's a pie, but all that's left are the crumbs and a very satisfied-looking dog underneath the bench. Conversation, if you can call it that, is a raucous mix of arguments, boasts, and the kind of gossip that sticks to your ears for days. You call that a fish? I've seen bigger minnows in a puddle. If the blacksmith's wife can bake, I'll eat my hat, or at least her biscuits. Heard the king's men are coming. About time someone sorted out that tollgate thief. That's no thief, that's just my cousin Alfred. He's got a heavy hand and light feet, but he's harmless as a shorn sheep. You watch alliances form and dissolve in the space of a single mug. A merchant and a miller who were haggling furiously in the market now toast each other's health and promptly try to out-eat one another. Old Tom tells a joke so bad that Greta, passing by, threatens to put soap in his stew. Laughter rings out. Someone belts a song. Someone else, not to be outdone, launches into a limerick about a monk, a mule, and an unfortunate batch of ale. This is also the hour when disputes are aired and, sometimes, settled. The Reeves assistant loiters near the fire, taking mental notes as farmers complain about taxes, muddy roads, or who owes whom a chicken from last spring's bet. Arguments swell and fade with the clatter of plates, but rarely turn truly sour. If tempers rise, Harold plants himself between the parties, arms folded, eyebrow raised, and says, "Settle it over stew or take it outside." 9 times out of 10, the stew wins. The room is thick with smells: stew, smoke, a hint of mildew, and a background hum of damp wool and hopeful onions. Sunlight streams through the warped window panes, dappling the crowd with gold. Every face is lit in relief. The exhausted farmer, the sly-eyed peddler, the dreamy youth carving their initials into the bench, convinced no one notices. Everyone does, and most are adding their own. Children run between legs, collecting scraps and stories, hoping to sneak an extra bite before Greta catches them. The inn-cat patrols the benches, switching allegiance to whoever drops the juiciest morsel. Somewhere in the back, the bard launches into a ballad so earnest that even the regulars quiet down just for a moment, then immediately resume their debate about whether the baker's apprentice is actually a prince in disguise. You realize that the midday meal is about more than food. It's about claiming a place at the table, having a voice in the din, finding your people, if only until the stew runs out. Friendships are forged and broken in a heartbeat. Debts and dares are exchanged as quickly as glances, and even the loneliest soul finds a kind of warmth, wedged between two strangers in a bowl of something steaming. The plate's empty, the stew pot scrapes bottom, and conversation winds down to grumbling and plans for the afternoon. Some guests head for the yard, others to their beds, and a few unlucky souls are pressed into dishwashing duty by a gleeful Greta. The inn, momentarily quieter, seems to exhale, a satisfied sigh, a pause before the next wave. You lean back, the weight of lunch warm in your belly, the echo of laughter in your ears, and let yourself simply exist in the cheerful, bustling heart of the inn. A hush and breathe. There's a special kind of hush that falls over a medieval inn when strangers cross the threshold, a prickling at the back of every neck as all conversation tilts ever so slightly in their direction. By the time the sunlight has finished sliding through the door behind them, a dozen silent bets have already been placed. Are they trouble, or are they just lost? Is that mud on their boots, or something more ominous? Harold, master of ceremonies and suspicions, gives them his famous "I've seen it all" stare, but even he leans in just a little to catch the first words out of their mouths. Today, you're in for a treat. A trio of monks with travel-worn sandals, a clutch of mercenaries with sword belts clanking like a blacksmith's shop, and one figure wrapped so tightly in a gray cloak that you're not sure if it's a man, a woman, or perhaps a heap of laundry that's grown legs. The air ripples with anticipation, and you suddenly understand why some folks haunt the inn all day. Where else can you see the world walk right through your door, trailing rumors and rainwater? The monks enter first, their robes patched and dusted with half the region's roads. They move in a little pack, eyes bright but wary, as if half expecting someone to pelt them with turnips. The regulars slide over to make room, hiding smirks and unfinished mugs. Greta, ever the hostess, offers them beer. For strength, brothers, not sin, and is rewarded with a blessing that covers her, the bread, and possibly the cat, who now carries a faint whiff of incense. The monks speak Latin among themselves, and you hear a snatch of miserere nobis, and, less piously, did you see the price of cheese in the last town? One of them produces a parchment, unrolls it, and proceeds to sketch the inn's sign with an ink-stained finger, muttering about records for the abbot. If you ask what that means, you'll get a lecture, and possibly a request for a donation. Next, the mercenaries arrive. You'd know them even if they weren't bristling with steel. The way they take in the exits, the way their laughter is just a bit too loud, the way every hand stays close to the hilt. Their leader, a woman with a scar that curls like a question mark across her cheek, orders ale for her crew and water for herself, which immediately marks her as someone to watch. Nobody drinks the water unless they trust their luck or their stomach. They settle in, spreading out like a troop of dogs marking territory, boots up, elbows wide, stories bigger than their swords. A few regulars bristle at the intrusion, but most settle in to eavesdrop, hoping for a glimpse of the outside world, or maybe a fresh scandal to spice up supper. You're close enough to catch the tail end of a tale, so then the Baron's son says, "It's just a flesh wound," and the priest faints dead away. The laughter is loud, a little forced, and you realize the mercenaries are putting on a show. They're as much actors as warriors, and the inn is their stage. Each joke a probe, each boast a test. Greta, unimpressed, threatens to water the ale if the stories don't improve. The leader grins and promises a song after dark, one with just enough blood to keep the children wide-eyed. But it's the gray-cloaked figure who draws the most curiosity. They slip in unnoticed at first, melting into a dark corner, hands wrapped around a chipped mug. Some say it's a spy sent by a rival lord. Others whisper of a witch or a fugitive priest, or maybe the king himself, running from his own court, which would be a first. The king's not known for running, except from responsibility. the regulars take turns inventing stories. By the end of lunch, the mysterious guest has been credited with 3 murders, 2 miracles, and a love affair with the baker's aunt. In truth, nobody knows. And that, of course, is the most exciting thing of all. Newcomers like these are a test for the inn, a chance for old stories to clash with new. The monks bring news from the north, a village flooded, a relic discovered, a saint whose statue weeps real tears, or perhaps just leaks rainwater through the chapel roof. The mercenaries offer rumors of rebellion, or at least a border skirmish or two. Never mind if the details change with every retelling. The mysterious stranger keeps their silence, drinking slowly, occasionally raising a hooded face to watch the room with unreadable eyes. Even the children sense the shift. Annika, bold as ever, sidles up to the monks to ask if they've seen dragons. They haven't, but one claims to have seen a very large lizard. The stable boy offers to polish the mercenary's boots for a coin, then, emboldened, asks if he can try on a helmet. He can, and immediately disappears beneath it. The cats stay far from the gray-cloaked guest, which only makes everyone more suspicious. Stories bloom like wildflowers, tales of haunted woods, lost gold, knights who joust by moonlight. The inn becomes a crossroads of not just people but possibilities. For a few golden hours, the walls seem wider, the air richer, the world itself bigger and more strange. You find yourself leaning in, just like the regulars, wanting to believe that maybe, just maybe, the stranger beside you is a hero in disguise, or a villain on the run, or the answer to a riddle no one's dared to ask. By the time the monks retreat to their corner to pray, the mercenaries start a game of dice that'll end in either song or swordplay, and the gray cloak slips upstairs, vanishing with the quiet certainty of someone who's dodged more than one question in their life. The inn is changed, just a little. For the better or the worse, nobody can say. Only that there's a feeling in the air, restless, humming, new, a hush and breathe. If you want to find the real drama of a medieval inn, don't look to the brawling mercenaries or the whispering monks in the tap room. Duck your head, squeeze past Greta balancing 6 mugs and a pie, and slip through the smoky archway that leads to the kitchen. Here, beneath soot-blackened beams, the true crucible of survival roars to life, and the air is so thick with heat, spice, and panic that you feel your eyebrows singe just by crossing the threshold. Welcome to the kitchen inferno, where Harold rules with an iron ladle and a vocabulary that would make a sailor blush. You're greeted by the sharp tang of onions frying, the earthy aroma of roots unearthed from the inn's sorry excuse for a garden, and the constant sizzle of something that's either soon to be dinner or already a small disaster. The hearth dominates the room, wide-mouthed and hungry, spitting sparks and smoke in equal measure. Pans hang from every hook, cauldrons bubble with mysterious intent. A single loaf of bread rises heroically, if unevenly, near the embers, already eyed by the cats as their next conquest. Everything in here is a race. Greta's dicing vegetables with the cold-blooded efficiency of a medieval assassin, her blade thumping in time to the endless complaints and requests flying in from the taproom. Annika, perched on a stool too tall for her legs, is vigorously churning butter, slopping half of it onto her dress and attracting the affections of at least 2 dogs and a chicken, who seems to have gotten lost on its way to destiny. Someone's yelling about salt, someone else about missing spoons, and in the far corner, a boy is washing mugs so furiously you suspect he's taking out a year's worth of frustrations on the pewter. And then there's Harold, the self-styled lord of the larder, sweating like a bishop at tax time and barking orders at anyone in earshot. He's poking a hunk of meat the size of a small child, muttering about proper browning, and the abject state of contemporary turnips. He pauses to rescue a pan from the flames, scowling, of course, then resumes his regular monologue about the virtues of rosemary, the herb, not the widow from down the lane, though she gets mentioned often enough. Kitchen time is measured differently, by the number of eggs that survive the scramble, by the tally of spoons vanished and occasionally recovered from the inn cat's secret stash, by the speed with which a pot of gruel can be thickened and disguised as stew when guests are plentiful and game is thin. Every scrap is precious. Greta once made soup out of nothing but onion peelings, stale bread, and a mysterious bone, and the guests declared it the best meal they'd had in a fortnight. Proof, if you needed it, that hunger is the best seasoning. There are hazards everywhere. A cook's life is a dance between open flames, slippery floors, and the constant threat of sabotage by the ever-hopeful animals who drift in and out. The butter goes missing, again, and is found in a dog's mouth. The soup tastes off, only for someone to realize that the herbs Annika added were actually leaves from the hedge outside. Well, at least they're local. Someone else is accused of drinking the beer meant for the batter, and Harold is forced to settle the matter by taste testing the evidence. He does, thoroughly. But even in the chaos, there's beauty, a kind of wild, smoky ballet. Greta swirls past, setting a tray to rest on her hip, calling for fresh cheese, then deftly ladling sauce onto a pie. She flirts with disaster, laughs at failure, and juggles plates with a rhythm that's almost musical. Annika cackles as she rescues a pie from the dog's eager jaws, triumphantly presenting it to Harold, who inspects it like a jeweler sizing up a suspect gem. A victory at last, until a guest shouts for more bread, and the cycle begins anew. Occasionally a hush falls, just for a heartbeat, when everyone realizes the meal is moments from disaster or perfection. The fire crackles, the pot bubbles, and all eyes are fixed on Harold as he delivers his verdict with the gravity of a king passing judgment. If the dish passes muster, there's a cheer and a round of backslapping. If not, well, someone fetches more salt and tries again, because the only thing worse than a kitchen defeat is letting Greta see you cry. Of course, no medieval kitchen would be complete without a dash of superstition and scandal. Greta keeps a lucky wooden spoon tied to her apron, refusing to let anyone else touch it. Harold swears by his sacred skillet, a battered iron pan that he claims once deflected an arrow. The others say it was only a badly aimed apple, but let him have his legend. At least once a week, someone claims to see a ghostly cook whisking through the steam, and the children dare each other to leave a crust of bread out for the kitchen sprite. The worst fate? Spilling salt and not throwing a pinch over your shoulder. Everyone knows that invites disaster. The best meals, though, are accidents. An extra pinch of spice, a lucky rescue from the flames, the wrong ingredient at just the right time. When the food is finally borne out into the tap room, sometimes triumphant, sometimes merely edible, it carries with it the story of its creation, the sweat, the laughter, the curses, and the camaraderie of the fire-lit chaos. Each dish is a tiny epic, served up with a wink and a warning. Eat fast, because there's always another hungry crowd on the way. By the time the last pot is scraped, the last plate licked clean, and the kitchen staff has collapsed onto the benches, breathless but grinning, you realize the miracle that's just been pulled off. It might not be fancy, it's certainly not clean, but it's real, and it's yours, and for one shining moment, everyone agrees. No inn anywhere else could possibly taste like this. A hush and breathe. If breakfast and lunch are the inn's drum beats, the slow and steady rhythm of survival, then evening, when the barrels are cracked and the ale runs wild, is the grand crescendo. This is when the day's hard edges soften, disputes get smoothed, or sometimes stoked, and you realize that in a medieval inn, the line between stranger and friend is only as thick as the next round. The sun sinks, painting the window panes gold, and the shadows stretch like cats along the benches. There's a moment of hush, a brief, golden silence, as Greta hoists the first heavy pitcher and pours. The sound alone is enough to make half the village come running. That glorious, frothy slosh as ale hits the mug, followed by the unmistakable thunk as it's set before you, cool and brimming. If you're close enough, you might get a spritz of foam on your sleeve, a small price for front row seats to the coming chaos. You raise your mug and the taste hits you. Hearty, yeasty, a little sour, the kind of drink that promises to wash away the dust of the day and leave only the best memories behind, or none at all, if you're ambitious. Around you, the regulars settle in with the familiarity of old boots. Merchants, farmhands, even the haughty knight from earlier. Everyone finds a place at the table now. Rank and riches mean less with every round, and more than one baron has woken up wedged between a blacksmith and a pig drover, unsure who owes whom a drink. As the ale flows, so do the stories. Harold, who has spent the entire afternoon perfecting his glower, suddenly becomes a fountain of wisdom, and if you listen closely, nonsense. He retells the legend of the inn's founding, how a lost prince once slept in the stable and left behind a golden horseshoe. He insists it's nailed to a beam above the hearth, though nobody's ever seen it. Greta tells a rival tale. The horseshoe was made of cheese and eaten by a particularly clever rat. By the second pitcher, even the shyest guest has a tale to share. Lost loves, haunted wells, pigs that can count to 7. I swear on my mother's apron is the universal oath. By the third round, mothers, aprons, and all notions of fact have vanished in a haze of laughter. The energy in the room builds and spills over. A bard strikes up a tune, strumming a tune that's half lullaby, half rebellion. The crowd joins in, every verse louder and less accurate than the last. If you're new, you might try to sit back and watch, but it's useless. Within minutes, a mug is pressed into your hand, a verse is thrust in your direction, and you're drawn into a chorus that's carried across kingdoms and kitchens alike. Some songs are ancient, some are invented on the spot. All are improved by ale. The air is thick with more than just music. Arguments flare and fizzle over debts, lost games, or the relative virtues of barley versus wheat. Sometimes a boast becomes a bet, and a bet becomes a brawl, though Greta or Harold usually intervenes before blood stains the rushes. "Take it outside," Harold growls, and miraculously, most do. But the most vicious fights are the quiet ones. Two old rivals, glaring over their mugs, locked in a duel of withering sighs and passive-aggressive drinking. But for every argument, there are a dozen jokes, 100 hugs, and enough flirting to keep Annika's matchmaking instincts buzzing for a week. Love is in the air, or at least infatuation, lubricated by ale and the warm glow of firelight. A farmer proposes to a baker's daughter with a handful of wildflowers and a slurred promise of pigs. A merchant tries to impress a traveler by claiming he once drank a whole cask. No one believes him, but everyone encourages him to try again. The bravest souls even attempt the innkeeper's challenge, a series of increasingly ridiculous dares that ends, inevitably, with someone singing on a table and someone else trying to waltz with the broom. And then, the secrets bubble up. Liquid courage loosens even the tightest lips. Greta, pouring another round, overhears everything and shares nothing, unless it's too good to waste. The monk confesses that he once cheated at dice. The mercenary admits she can't ride a horse sober. Even Harold leans in and mutters about a treasure map he almost found, back when his beard was brown. For a few hours at least, everyone is equal, stripped down to their stories, their laughter, and the steady thump of mugs on wood. The inn itself seems to join the revelry. Beams creak as if they're laughing along. The fire spits sparks that swirl up the chimney, lighting the room with dancing gold. The rushes are damp, the tables sticky, and yet there's nowhere in the world you'd rather be. You catch a glimpse of the moon through the smoke-streaked window and wonder how many such nights have been lost and found beneath this battered roof. As the evening wanes, so do the drinkers. Some drift off to bed, arms slung around new friends. A few stubborn souls nurse their last mugs, eyes glazed but spirits high. The bard strums a gentle, wordless tune, soothing, almost sweet. Greta and Harold share a quiet nod. Another night, another memory added to the old inn's ledger. You savor the last mouthful of ale, the warmth in your belly, and the chorus of voices that still linger in the air. This, you realize, is the real secret of the inn. Not the food, not even the fire, but the way it gathers strangers and makes them kin, if only for a single ale-soaked night. A hush and breathe. Let's slip away from the warm glow and raucous cheer of the main hall, just for a while. You duck through a narrow door at the back of the inn, past barrels stacked higher than your head, and crates marked with mysterious symbols, none of which match their contents, naturally. Here, in the half-dark, with only a flickering candle and the sour tang of spilled ale for company, is where the inn's real business is done. Welcome to the back room, a place as necessary to a medieval inn as the kitchen or the well, maybe even more so. The air is different here, thicker somehow, like a secret kept too long. Shadows cling to the walls. Every surface is stained with the evidence of past negotiations, splatters of wax, wine rings, a suspiciously old blood stain that's probably just berry juice. At least, that's what Greta claims. If the walls could talk, they'd do so only after being slipped a generous bribe. This is where deals get made. Not the public ones, cattle bought and sold, marriages negotiated loudly over lunch, or someone betting 3 hens on the outcome of the afternoon's arm wrestling contest. No, this room is for the trades that want darkness. Debts settled with a handshake and a glare, a pouch of coin changing hands with the briefest of nods, a crate passed quietly from a merchant to a cloaked stranger while both keep one hand on their knives. You're not the only one who slipped away from the festivities. 2 local farmers, rivals in daylight, partners in secrecy, are hunched over a battered dice board, arguing in whispers about who owes what from last week's unlucky throws. The Reeves assistant, a nervous sort with eyes like a ferret, sits with a parchment curled in his fist, ready to collect a debt, issue a warning, or quietly look the other way for the right price. A trader from the next shire arrives, stubble-faced and sweating, clutching a bundle that's much too small to be honest. He glances at you, then at the door, and mutters a code phrase that sounds suspiciously like, "The crow flies at midnight." Harold, who's never as drunk as he seems, appears from nowhere to do the honors. Let's see the goods then. No one speaks above a whisper. A deal is made, sealed with spit and the exchange of something small, hard and clinking, coin, or perhaps a gem, or maybe just a favor owed on a stormy night. And then there's the real drama, the chessboard of information. The inn is the best spy network for miles, and the back room is its nerve center. This is where Greta learns about the merchant's wife who's planning to leave with the traveling glassblower, or where the miller's apprentice sells news about who's been overfilling their sacks. Secrets have value, sometimes more than money. A rumor can get you a meal, a warning, or, on a bad day, a dagger between the ribs. If you listen carefully, you'll hear the names of those who've crossed the wrong person and the soft promises of what's to come. Of course, not all deals are cutthroat. There are pacts of friendship made over mugs of the special brandy, bargains struck to help a neighbor through a bad harvest, and confessions shared in the dark because the confessional booth is too far and too cold. Some debts are forgiven here with a handshake and a story about better days. Others linger, sticking to the air like the scent of spilled beer. The back room is also the stage for the inn's greatest drama: the barter of forbidden or taxed goods. Imported spices, a bolt of silk hidden beneath a sack of oats, or a flask of French brandy fallen off the back of a cart. There's a dance to it, one hand always on your purse, the other on your conscience. Greta, who has the sharpest nose in 3 counties, can sniff out contraband at 50 paces and knows when to turn a blind eye, when to threaten, and when to take her own small cut. Tonight, you watch as a game unfolds. A group of mercenaries, off-duty but never unarmed, gather around a battered table with the gray-cloaked stranger from earlier. Coins click, daggers gleam, and every word is a potential feint. A low conversation about guard work is really about something else. A little extra muscle for a journey, perhaps, or the retrieval of an item best left undescribed. Deals are struck not just with gold, but with glances, favors, and the old currency of mutual suspicion. All the while, the common room hums in the background, muffled and distant. Laughter, song, the crash of a mug, all the sounds of ordinary life. But here, in the back room, the stakes feel higher. Every word is weighted. Every silence is a gamble. It's no place for the naive, but you, drawn by curiosity or necessity, can't help but be fascinated by the shadowy ballet. Sometimes someone gets caught, a peddler with sticky fingers, a guest who thought the back room was just for a quick nap. Harold has his ways of handling these mishaps. A quiet warning, a gentle shove back toward the light, or, on the rare occasion when things turn truly sour, a swift call for the constable. But most know better than to push their luck. The inn's reputation is built on the unspoken agreement. What happens in the back room stays in the back room, or else. You linger a moment longer, catching the flicker of candlelight on the edge of a coin, the shadow of a smile, the brief, knowing nod of a deal well made. Then you slip back out, letting the door swing quietly shut behind you. The warmth and laughter of the main room hit you like a wave, and you realize you've just tasted the secret heart of the inn, hidden in half-darkness, sealed with silent handshakes and stories that will never reach the daylight. A hush and breathe. It comes on quietly at first, a hush that settles over the inn as darkness thickens beyond the warped window panes. The day's chaos is packed away with the last dish and the last half-hearted sweep of the rushes. The crowd thins. The most boisterous have stumbled home or upstairs, leaving behind a smaller knot of souls with nowhere urgent to be, a half-mug to nurse, and a story or two burning their tongues. This is the hour when time loosens, and the inn becomes a little pocket of possibility, the world beyond its doors shrinking to a memory and a murmur. You feel it in the slow, glowing crawl of the fire, coaxed alive again by Greta, who knows that true comfort comes in embers, not flames. She moves more gently now, handing out mugs not with the bluster of earlier, but with a quiet touch, a wink, or a softly whispered joke. Even Harold, that bear of a man, sits a little closer to the hearth, his eyes reflecting the orange light, his famous spoon momentarily at rest. The benches groan under fewer bodies but more secrets. Someone closes the shutters, No one's quite sure who, but it's always done, as if the act itself holds back the darkness and keeps the stories in. A stray draft teases the candle on your table, making its flame lean and flicker like an eager listener. Outside, you can just make out the moan of wind, or perhaps a fox on the prowl. But inside, it's all hush and hush and hush, punctuated by the crackle of a fresh log and the soft clink of a mug set down just so. It starts, as always, with a boast, soft at first, but swelling as others join in, warming to the night's unfolding. Old Tom claims he once met the king's jester, and that the fellow stole his boots and his best joke in the same hour. The merchant, weary from the day's trading, spins a tale of a bridge that only appears at midnight, built by elves and crossed by fools. Greta rolls her eyes but can't resist adding her own, how her grandmother danced with the ghost, and that's why she never married a miller, which somehow is also why Greta never trusts men who whistle after dark. This is how it goes. Fact and fiction blend like wine and water, and the best stories are those that teeter on the edge of belief. Tonight, the bard, now on his third mug and his fourth try at tuning his lute, offers a ballad about the haunted woods nearby. He claims he spent a night beneath the yew trees, listening to the spirits wail and the trees whisper secrets only the dead could know. Annika, wide-eyed, wants to know if he was afraid. Afraid? He says. No, but I'll never eat yewberries again. The room erupts in quiet laughter, the kind that rolls out in waves and leaves everyone a little warmer. You notice how the shadows grow longer as the stories grow stranger. A scarred mercenary in the corner, quiet all evening, finally speaks up. I saw a wolf once, as big as a horse, yellow eyes, silent paws, stole a chicken right from under my nose. No one argues, not even Greta, who might, in daylight, point out that the only thing she's ever seen him catch is a hangover. Here, now, in this soft-lit moment, anything could be true. Harold's voice joins in, low and gravelly, with the tale of the inn's first winter, the year the river froze solid and travelers came in with frost in their beards and tales of a white lady gliding over the ice. She blessed the bread that year, Harold claims, and that's why it's never molded since. A gentle lie, maybe, or a truth too odd for daylight. Either way, the regulars nod, content to let the magic hang. As the night deepens, so do the stories. The bravest or drunkest attempt riddles, bets, dares. The monk, who's usually silent, shares a tale of a relic smuggled across 3 kingdoms, hidden in a loaf of rye, and nearly fed to a bishop's dog. The stranger in the gray cloak, having said almost nothing all day, leans forward and quietly describes a city of towers, so tall the birds forget how to land, and for a moment, the inn ceiling feels impossibly far above. Children, if they're still awake, are tucked into corners or draped over laps, lulled by the rhythm of story and fire. Even the animals pause. Cats curled on benches, dogs sprawled beneath the table, as if they too are listening for the next good tale. It's a moment suspended. No chores, no debts, no fear of lice or spilled stew. Only the shared hum of voices, the peace of being neither here nor there, past nor future. In this hour you feel time stretch and soften, all sharpness dulled by the gentle press of warmth and words. The stories wind down, as they always do, with a yawn or a softly spoken, "That'll do for tonight." Someone rises to stir the coals. Someone else refills the mugs with water for the last round. A hush falls, a true hush, not empty but full, the hush of people content in company and story. Greta gathers the last empty cups and wishes everyone a dreamless night. Harold snuffs the candles one by one, their smoke swirling up to the beams where all the night's stories will linger till morning. You linger a moment longer, watching the shadows pool and the fire burn low, feeling the glow of belonging that only comes when day gives way to story and story gives way to night. A hush and breathe. You'd think, after so many hours of food, fire, and stories, that a medieval inn would gently wind down, guests yawning their way up the stairs or out into the cool hush of night. Not here, not now. The hush after the last story is never the true end. It's only an intermission. The inn's real test of character begins once the clock's lost all meaning. The candles burn to stubs, and even the mice have given up their nightly schemes, choosing instead to watch the show. This is the hour when good intentions unravel and inhibitions finally admit defeat. The benches, those proud rows of the day's debate, now buckle beneath snoring forms and tangled legs. But some souls, always a few, refuse to surrender. They cling to the tap room as if it might vanish with the dawn, determined to squeeze every last drop of life from the dregs of the night. Take the far table, for example, where a cluster of merchants and farmhands are engaged in the world's longest arm wrestling contest. Their faces locked in red-faced grimaces, their spectators doling out advice and side bets with a seriousness that would shame the royal mint. The winner claims bragging rights and possibly the last chunk of cheese. The loser earns the privilege of buying a round for the room, a fate greeted with mock sorrow and actual enthusiasm. Nearby, a squire attempts to recite poetry to Greta, the world's most practical barmaid, who parries every rhymed couplet with a quip sharp enough to shave a boar. His verses grow more tangled, his blush deeper, and soon the crowd joins in, adding their own bawdy lines and suggestions. By the time Greta laughs, the squire's red as a beet and everyone else is in stitches except old Tom, who's already halfway through a nap, snoring into his mug. Flirting is everywhere, often indistinguishable from fighting, or maybe that's just how love works here. Two young shepherds trade insults and sheep puns until they're both blushing, and the regulars are taking bets on who will cave first. In the corner, a pair of mercenaries arm wrestle with one hand and hold hands with the other. A widow swats away a baker's wandering hand with a ladle, only to let him refill her cup a minute later. Greta, referee and ringleader, keeps the peace with her infamous glare and, when that fails, a not-so-gentle prod with the broom. Of course, some tempers can't be contained. The line between friendly roughhousing and full-on brawling is as thin as Greta's patience. A spilled drink, a misheard insult, or a boast gone too far, and suddenly, two men are squaring off in the rushes, fists swinging and friends egging them on. Harold appears with the weary authority of a man who's seen it all, steps between the combatants, and utters the magic phrase, "outside." Somehow the very walls agree, and the scuffle spills out into the yard, where it usually fizzles in the cold or ends in a handshake and a shared flask. If it doesn't, well, nobody likes to test Greta's aim with a bucket of cold water. Back inside, the mood swings wildly, singing, shouting, snoring. The bard, now horizontal and only occasionally coherent, mumbles a lullaby that turns into a sea shanty before collapsing into snores. Annika and her friends try to invent a new game involving crumbs, dice, and a piece of string, but are thwarted by Harold, who points them in the direction of bed with a stern look that still can't hide his fondness. Then there are the true diehards, the travelers with nowhere else to go, hunched over their mugs as if seeking answers in the sediment. The card game in the shadowy corner grows heated, voices low but urgent, fortunes rising and falling on the turn of a dog-eared card. The stakes might be real coin or just a day's worth of stories. Both are precious in their own way. And always, the slow, creeping tide of exhaustion. Heads droop, shoulders slump, mugs slip from sleepy hands and clatter to the boards. A merchant snores blend with the creak of timbers. Someone attempts to toast to old friends in new ale, but only gets as far as old fur, before toppling over, applause and gentle mockery following them down. Harold, ever merciful, lets them stay where they fall, provided they're not blocking the fire or drooling on the silverware. You can't help but smile at the tableau. Bodies slumped in awkward angles, boots kicked off, a cat purring in the crook of someone's knee. Even Greta, usually the last one standing, finally surrenders to a bench and a mug of warm cider, eyes heavy, smile soft around the edges. The inn is quieter now, but not silent. The walls still remember the laughter, the clink of mugs, the echo of a dozen unfinished stories. They hold these sounds close, like embers under the ash, waiting for another day. But for now, in this magical muddle of fighting, flirting, and unceremonious collapse, you feel the strange comfort of a place where no one judges the hour or your lack of composure. Here, it's understood that everyone has their limit, and everyone, sooner or later, falls asleep where they sit. A hush and breathe. If you ever want to know who the true warriors of a medieval inn are, don't look for the knights or the mercenaries. Look for the souls who face the aftermath. Cleaning up after a night in the common room is a special kind of battle, and the enemy is everywhere. In the sour-soaked rushes underfoot, the sticky tables that seem to breed mysterious stains, and the corners where the bravest mouse in the Shire holds his ground with the confidence of a small, furry landlord. Dawn creeps in pale and apologetic, lighting up the battlefield. The remains of last night's revelry are scattered with wild abandon. You tiptoe through the wreckage, upended mugs, gnawed bones, a single muddy boot with no obvious owner, and what might once have been a cabbage, now pressed flat beneath a snoring merchant. The smell hits you first, a heady blend of spilled ale, charred meat, singed candle wax, sweat, and something distinctly rodentine. If you were hoping for a fresh start, you might have to look somewhere else, or at least open all the windows. The cleanup crew, consisting mostly of Greta, a half-awake Annika, and a rotating cast of conscripts and volunteers with guilty consciences, assembles with groans and gripes. Greta, never one to sugarcoat the state of things, surveys the room with the grim satisfaction of a general inspecting a battlefield. Right, let's see who's still breathing and what's still worth salvaging, she says, planting her hands on her hips. The first task is the rushes. By medieval standards, the floor covering of choice is not a rug or tile, but fresh, or at least not actively composting rushes, scattered thick to soak up whatever the night throws down. After a full evening of spilled ale, soup, and other unspeakables, the rushes resemble a swamp more than flooring. Greta and Annika sweep them up in great armfuls, disturbing a cloud of crumbs, odd buttons, and, inevitably, the resident mouse, who pauses, wipes his whiskers on a cheese rind, and stares up with the weary dignity of a landlord collecting rent. Not this again, his beady eyes seem to say. Next come the mugs and plates, which seem to multiply in the night. Pewter, wood, and clay, some bearing only the faintest stain, others requiring tools best described as implements of exorcism. Harold, who can nurse a grudge as well as a hangover, stalks the room collecting spoons with the air of a man who suspects at least 3 have run off to start a new life in the woods. Every year I buy more. Every year the forest gets richer, he mutters, shaking his head. Annika giggles and pretends not to notice the extra spoon tucked up her sleeve. The tables, battle-scarred and proud, bear the worst of it. Each gouge and burn mark tells a story. A knife slipped in an arm wrestling match, a candle toppled by a flailing elbow, a mug slammed down in triumph or defeat. The sticky layer that coats every inch is less narrative, more cautionary tale. Greta attacks it with a rag, a bucket of well water, and a cleaning solution of her own devising. Secret recipe, vinegar, a dash of ale, and a prayer to St. Jude, patron of lost causes. And then there's the question of what the night has left behind. Socks, hats, a love letter scrawled on the back of a bill of sale, a playing card that somehow ended up baked into a loaf of bread. Harold surveys the lost and found pile and snorts. If no one claims it by market day, it's mine. Except the hat with the feather, that's Annika's, and don't let her tell you different. The kitchen is another world entirely. Pots crusted with the remains of last night's stew, whose main ingredient now seems to be regret. A roasting spit welded solid with fat, a trail of muddy footprints leading to a half-empty barrel of pickled onions. Greta makes short work of the worst, threatening anyone who lingers with the dish rag. The cats, sensing a lull in the chaos, emerge from their hiding places to scavenge, more efficient perhaps than the actual cleanup crew. Outside, the yard bears its own scars. A trail of half-buried apples, a flock of geese still outraged by the previous night's foot race, and a wheelbarrow full of mysterious detritus destined for the compost heap, or, if the rumor mill is right, a rival inn's doorstep. Annika rounds up the last of the chickens, humming to herself, while Greta takes a well-earned swig from the special bottle she keeps hidden behind the flour sacks. Of course, it's not all grim. There are little victories, a silver coin found beneath the rushes, cause for celebration. A half loaf of bread still soft enough to eat, breakfast sorted, and the satisfaction of seeing the common room slowly, miraculously, return to something resembling order. The sun pushes a golden finger through the cleanest window, and for a moment, the place almost sparkles, if you squint and ignore the mouse in the corner, counting his cheese. There's camaraderie, too, in shared misery. Greta and Harold exchange tired jokes, Annika invents a game out of stacking mugs, and even the surliest guest pitches in, if only to win a little favor for the next time they overstay their welcome. Cleaning up might not be glamorous, but it's honest, and when the last rag is wrung, there's a sense of pride in having faced the night and lived to see another day. At last, the tables are wiped, the rushes are swept, the spoons, mostly, accounted for. The mouse retreats to his hideaway, the cats resume their rounds, and the inn is ready. Well, as ready as it ever gets, for whatever comes next. A hush and breathe. There's a special kind of silence that only settles in the hour before dawn, when the fire is nothing but coals, and the last echo of laughter has faded into the beams. It's the silence of a place catching its breath, the hush before the next uproar, when the inn holds its secrets tight, cradled in the darkness just before the world tips over into day. You wake, or maybe you never quite slept, and find yourself wandering these shadowed halls, guided by the softest candle, drawn by a curiosity that always seems sharper when everyone else is dreaming. The air is cool and close, heavy with 100 scents, smoke, old ale, bread crusts, the faintest trace of lavender from Greta's hidden sachets. The tables, so rowdy just hours ago, now sit empty and oddly dignified, bearing the marks of 1,000 hands and 100 spilled tales. You hear it, there in the hush, the faint creak of a stair, the distant drip from the leaky gutter outside, the slow, steady tick of your own heartbeat. The inn, you realize, never truly sleeps. It just rearranges its mischief for another round. It's in these quiet moments that you glimpse the secret life of the place. In the kitchen, a mouse, Yes, that same plucky little landlord creeps along the rafters, snatching crumbs with the stealth of a born thief. Greta's boots, lined up by the back door, betray a side of her nobody sees by daylight. One is patched with a bit of sky blue ribbon, the other scuffed from a dozen midnight errands no one's ever questioned. Harold, presumed asleep and snoring like a cart full of kettles, actually sits at the far end of the tap room, jotting numbers and nonsense in his battered ledger by candlelight, his famous scowl softening in the glow. You catch a whiff of a smile as he finds a coin tucked between the pages, a tip, or a reminder that fortune, like guests, comes and goes without warning. The rooms upstairs creak and sigh. Behind every door, secrets nestle. A love letter hidden under a pillow, a lucky charm tied to a bedpost, a pair of boots drying by the window after a journey nobody's supposed to know about. You hear the sigh of a dreamer, the snore of a merchant, the quiet sob of someone who's lost more than they'll ever admit in daylight. In the corner room, the bard whispers new verses to the darkness, songs he'll claim came to him in a dream, but really were born from the restless quiet of a night spent almost, but not quite, alone. You find yourself wandering toward the yard, where the grass is pearled with dew and the stables exhale the warm, living breath of sleeping animals. The ghost horse, that pale rumor of a beast, flickers at the edge of your vision. Was it real, or just moonlight shifting on a patch of mist? The cats patrol the shadows, tails high, keeping their silent watch over secrets you'll never hear. Beyond the fence, the fields stretch into uncertainty, promising nothing, hiding everything. Back inside, you pause in the hallway, where the light from your candle pools on the old, warped boards. This is where Annika hid her first stash of sweets. This is where Greta scolded you for muddy boots and then slipped you an extra slice of bread. This is where, one night last winter, the entire inn huddled close during a storm, listening to the wind batter the shutters and pretending not to be afraid. Every plank is a memory, every shadow a story. In the tap room, you're not alone. A figure in a gray cloak, still up, as if waiting for someone or something, raises a hand in silent greeting. You trade a glance, a nod, an unspoken promise to keep each other's secrets, at least until morning. Maybe you linger together a while, neither one quite ready to surrender the night. Maybe you part, each slipping off to your own corner of the inn, your own sliver of silence. This is the hour for confessions, for quiet courage. If ever you needed to slip away unseen, to whisper a secret, or to simply sit and feel the world pause around you, this is your time. There's magic in the way the darkness presses close, in the promise of a new day balanced perfectly on the edge of the old. And then, almost before you're ready, the world begins to turn again. A rooster crows, distant and bold. The first cart rattles past on the road, bound for the market or the next village or whatever fresh nonsense awaits. The sky softens from black to blue to rose. The inn breathes in, creaks, and starts to stir. Footsteps overhead, a cough, a groan, a laugh from Greta as she catches you, once again, wandering past curfew. You snuff your candle and step out of the shadows, ready to begin again. The inn's secrets fade into memory, wrapped in cobweb and morning mist. But you carry them with you, a pocket full of stories, a sense that in the quiet just before dawn, you belonged utterly to a world half real and half dreamed. A hush and breathe.